Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's PGA Championship. Gonna go through the betting side of things, also some DFS exposure I'm getting to go through, give you an idea of how I'm attacking this week, some of my custom modeling. We'll talk some key stats, a few comp courses as well. You can go out there, incorporate in your process to go out there and have yourself a week. So a lot to talk through here. Let's start it off with a look at the Valhalla Golf Club, the home for this week's major, and how you can attack it from the stat perspective. Back in 2014, when we first saw this golf course, it was already long favoring some of your bomber types like a Rory McIlroy, who ended up winning that week. But since they added on even more yardage, it's going to be a little bit softer this year. Also, the addition of zoysia grass to the fairway and approaches is going to make this golf course play like 7,700 yards. So it's already 7,600 on the scorecard. Going to be a power week for sure. So whether it's off the tee distance, ball speed, whether it's some of the longer iron approaches, all are going to be a lot more prevalent this week, are some of my most emphasized stats of the week. After that, I'm looking at hard conditions, major championship type of courses. Putting is incorporated, but maybe a little bit less important on a week like this because I'm so heavy on that ball striking. We're looking at bogey avoidance, green and regulation. Around the green, also de-emphasized, kind of like the putting, just because of that emphasis on the ball striking. And then in terms of comps, I've got 4 that we can put in here. We've got Oak Hill, so the PGA Championship last year. We've got the Torrey Pines South course, so that's the home of the Farmers, and also where they had the US Open when they played it at Torrey, at Caves Valley Golf Club, and then also the Quail Hollow Club. So you've got some easier courses here like Caves Valley that are extremely long, have similar types of agronomy, and then a bunch of difficult golf courses that I would say are more like the shots gained major championships under hard conditions. So we're looking for the sort of golfer that can bomb it out there, hit those long irons, and in general that can take on a difficult track, right? Kind of like Oak Hill, this is going to be an execution test. You got to keep your ball in play off the tee, avoid that 4 or 5 inch rough. You're going to have some difficult around the green shots because you have that lush rough around the green. So the people that can hit the most fairways, hit the most green regulations, are going to be the players that we see at the top. So when you're hitting long irons, by the way, too, that's why power is so important, right? It's not just for the off the tee distance, right? A long golf course. It's also to make sure that you can hit the ball high enough into greens to hold them because they're going to play firm by the weekend. So this is a golf course that is going to pretty much test you across the board, but if there's anything that we can account for and incorporate into our analysis, right? Specifically with like outrights with top end ceiling plays, it's that shots gained tee to green. If you're going to go out there, finish top 5, it's likely because you're gaining 7 to 10 strokes with the tee to green play. And that's what I'm really looking for in my top end players. So with that being said, who are some of my top plays? So we're going to start off with 3 core plays that I've bet 2 of which outright. One of them is going to be for top 5, which will be down to the 8K range. But let's start off with my real conviction play this week, and that would be Brooks Koepka. I've took him at 14-1. That's this week. That's the number that's currently available on most sports books, if not slightly better on some of the smaller books. And I also got him at 20-1 before this week. So I was looking ahead to try and bet him at this course. He's the perfect course fit for what we're looking for here. But once I saw him start to get it working with the putter over the last live event or so, and also go out there and win over there in Singapore, it's an absolute no-brainer at $10,800. So I don't think he's going to be massively chalky this week. That's why I think for DFS in particular that he's a pretty solid option, mainly because we have Xander Schauffele $100 higher, right? And of course, coming in off the second place finish over there at that signature event. In general, some of the best form in the world. You've got Rory coming in off 2 straight wins. You've got Scotty winning 4 of his last 5 starts. All are going to get their own attention. So Brooks, while I do think he's not, going to get some ownership, right? He's not going to be completely unowned by any means. I do think that he's going to be reasonable in that 12 to 15% range. So at $10,800, a player that I think has just as much, if not more, win equity than all of those other players. Or you match him up with Xander, I'd take Brooks all day, right? It's not even close. I think Brooks, right, is going to have 3-4 times as many majors as Xander, but it's all said and done. And when you compare Rory, right, who hasn't won one in over a decade, right, give me Brooks all day there too, right? So I know he's got the 2 straight wins. Brooks, in my opinion, though, when it comes to major championship win equity, has as much as anyone else in the field not named Scotty. Now, Scotty, 13-2, right? He's 4-1 for a reason, right? I would still take him as the favorite, right? Even without that much practice. In fact, I'm still playing him in DFS this week, but obviously not a bet at 4-1. So I just think that the outright number on him is too low, right? If he was like 6-7-1, maybe he would just be the only person I'd bet outright and then move on. But outside of him, right, the guy that I trust the most to actually win a major Championship would be Brooks Koepka number 1, number 2 would be Jon Rahm, then maybe it'd go to Rory Xander, right? Both of them have their issues on Sundays. Obviously, Rory, the really good Sunday at the Wells Fargo, which was great for Showdown, great for some of our Sunday exposure when it came to props. But in major championships, we've yet to see that same kind of resolve. So I'm going to go to the proven winner here, the guy that we know gets better at these sort of events, right? Does not shy away from the big moment. And 14-1, maybe not the best number. If you can get the 16-1 number that they have out there in a few books, then I would be a huge buyer at that sort of price. So at 20-1, where I got him before the week, that's my main bet. That's where most of my exposure is. I put a solid $500 on him at 20-1. So obviously I'll be rooting for that for quite hard. But even over here on a Monday, I added him at 14-1 because of that form, because of the win. I think that compared to some of the other guys that are in that 15 to maybe 20-1 range, that he has infinitely more win equity, right? And even if you go to like the 20 to 30 range, like Brooks is going to win 5-6 times more majors than all those guys. Like a lot of the guys that are 20 to 31, right, might get one more major the rest of their life. Brooks Koepka has probably got another 3 or 4 in him, right, over the next 5-6 years. So he's the sort of player that I'm going to be looking for at this like 14 to 15-1 number, regardless of the major championship venue, right? So when we get to the Open, if he's 20, maybe 25-1, I'll bet on him at that sort of number. Masters next year, right? You give me a 20-1 on a Brooks or even a 15-16-1 like we're getting here, and I'm going to be somebody that's trying to get there too. So in terms of the shots gained metrics, we don't have that much to look at, but if you take a look at his numbers on Bent, he's been pretty decent for his career. Maybe not great, but pretty decent would be a good way to put it. You take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, so these are almost all major championships. He's gaining in all 4 categories, and he's gaining over 0.4 strokes in all 4 categories. So, I mean, doing his thing. If you take a look at the live golf stats, which are incomplete over there on that side, he's doing it all with the tee to green play. So if you take a look at the major championship stuff, it's actually the short game that's been carrying him. And if you zoom out to the last 24 measured rounds, I mean, he's still gaining across the board, right? Still gaining in all 4 stat categories, maybe not as severely as what you've seen over the last 12, but this last 12 rounds, again, all major championships, he's still absolutely lapping the field. So, I mean, we're dealing with an elite of all elite players when it comes to these sort of events. And at 10,800 or 8, I think he's priced up, but you've got to remember that pricing goes down to $5,000 this week, right? And we're going to have legit players, value plays that we talk up, right, in the 6-5K range out here in this video. So the $10,800 isn't as much of a problem, right? We're going to have the salary to make this sort of thing work, where we can take Brooks, still take a 9, maybe even 2 8K players up there towards the top, and round out the lineup with that kind of lineup construction. So outside of that, I also like Wendam Clark. So Wendam's actually the only other player I'm taking for an outright bet this week. So I'm keeping it pretty condensed, especially because I'm taking a guy at 14-1 to go out there and win. But in terms of win equity, Wendam is completely disrespected, right? Just like I think 14-1, especially 20-1, right, was disrespectful on Brooks. 40-1 on Wendam Clark makes no sense. I mean, this guy finished at 3rd at the RBC. Of course, that didn't fit his game at all, right? Went out there and nearly won a signature event. Last week, I know not his best stuff at the Wells Fargo, but played a lot better than the scorecard, right? I mean, we talked about him time and time again for Showdown. I mean, even out there on Sunday, right? Went out there and just played a lot better than you would get with his stats, and definitely than the scorecard would indicate. Just a player that's a lot closer than I think people would realize. So first off, the main reason for hope, right, would be some of the stuff that we've seen, especially at courses that don't necessarily fit his game. So last week, right, we'd expect him to play well, had that sour performance, but the T3 at the RBC Heritage is probably the most impressive of all of them. Now, missed the cut at Augusta, right? That's not such a surprise, given it was his first ever start out there at Augusta National. But at the RBC Heritage, you saw just the pure talent level Wendam Clark, right? That's a golf course that takes your main weapon away, right? Takes away your driver off the tee for somebody of his power. And normally, right, that'd be crippling to a bomber, right? To a player like Wendam Clark that depends on all of those gains off the tee. But he still went out there, finished in T3 there, was in contention the entire weekend. And sure, Scotty got him that week, right? He won 4 of his last 5 starts. Outside of Scotty Scheffler, this guy would have 3-4 wins this week. So last week burned me. I took him as an outright. I took him as a core play out there for DFS. It's hard to want to get back to that guy after he screws you, right, out there in your lineups. But this golf course, if anything, is even better for his game, right? Brooks, we didn't even talk about the course fit. I mean, off the tee, right, one of the best players in the world. Great long iron player, doing it with the short game. Like, I mean, he's gaining in all 4 stat categories. It would be hard not to fit a golf course. But Wendam Clark, right, we're looking for a power player. We're looking looking for a good long iron player. If anything, Wendam Clark is even better with his long irons than he is with some of the shorter clubs. And then when you take a look at the short game, he's definitely got that, right? If anything, he's known for that around the green and the putter. So Wendam Clark, a very well-rounded player, right? Even with the shaky form last week, is still doing decent over his last 12 rounds, right? Still gaining a bunch off the tee, still gaining with the putter, a little bit into the negative with the two, I'd say, approach, right? And then around the green. But if you zoom out, you get an idea for how he's actually playing, right? He's gaining in all four categories, right? Gaining significantly with the ball striking, still doing his thing with the putter. And sure, around the green, maybe a little bit sketchier lately than what we're used to seeing for Clark. But long term, I mean, he's got one of the best short games that we've seen. I mean, around US Open, right, LACC hit some of the most nasty, saucy chips that we've seen from somebody in contention. And kind of like Brooks, I think that Wendam Clark is a dog, right? Like, he's got that mentality. He's got that major championship sort of fortitude that you're going to have that mental fortitude to go out there and win one of these things. And, like, if you put Clark in contention with Xander and, like, Rory McIlroy, I would take Clark every single time if you match me up with those three. And I'd even do it at close to even odds, right? Which is the sad thing to say, because obviously these two have better odds for a reason, right? The form, they're at the top end of the board, talented guys, or future Hall of Famers themselves. But Wendam Clark, if you're telling me that we only have 18 holes left, they're all tied heading into the final round, I think a lot of people, it's not just me that would say this, would take Wendam Clark over those two, right? Just knowing that it's a Sunday shootout between those three. So $9,500, you're giving me that type of player that it will at least be a conversation, right? Maybe you take Rory, which I couldn't fault you, right? He's one of the best players of all time. But at the same time, Wendam Clark, right, it's still at least a conversation to have that kind of, argument. And he's $9,500, so way cheaper than he probably should be. And he's 40-1 to win. I mean, you have guys like Rory that are 6.5, 7-1, depending on your sports book, and then Clark 7 times, nearly 8 times higher when it comes to the outright odds. So that's where I see a lot of the value with Wendam, right, is understanding that the line has just drifted way too far. And I think the ownership's not going to be there, right? Guys are going to play Bryson. I think Joaquin Niemann from the Live Tour are deservingly going to get attention, right? Both playing beautiful golf. But Wendam Clark, after disappointing a ton of people out there at the Wells Fargo, is, I think, worth at least a few looks in some of those large field GBPs. So I'll leave it there with good old Windy, right? You heard my thought process for taking him at the Wells Fargo. It's very similar out here for the PGA, but another course that's a big hitter's ballpark, right? Fits the kind of skill set that we're looking for. Just needs to make more putts, right? Last week, gained tee to green, right? Gained with the ball striking categories. Around the green, lost a few strokes, which is kind of weird, right, for Wendam, right? Normally a lot better when it comes to the around the green, but the putter, right, lost 3 strokes there. That never happens for Wendam. So that needs to turn around, and if it does, he's going to go out there and have a much better performance. Now for our play that we're taking for a core play here, but not so much for an outright, is Dustin Johnson. I'm taking him for a top 5 bet at plus 1,500. And I considered taking him for an outright at 75-1, which I might still add by the time we get to Thursday. But with DJ, this is all about course fit, and it's all about general pedigree, right? If you take a look at the Masters performance, not so great for DJ, right? Obviously fell off a little bit there and ended up if we take a look at the recent form here, I believe he missed the cut at the Masters, right? Did he? Yeah, he ended up missing the cut at that Masters. At the US Open the year before, though, right, that major championship, top 10, has also had a few other pop performances over the last 2-3 seasons. Won the Masters, right? What was that, back 4 seasons ago? During the Masters that was in November, so a little bit of a different setup that time. But Dustin Johnson is still a huge factor in the Live Tour, right? And for as much as crap as people want to give these Live Tour players, when you see somebody like Bryson get into contention, when you see Brooks win last year, you have guys like Cam Smith over there. I mean, John Rahm joins them. It's hard to argue that it's non-competitive, right? I mean, you can't say that with a straight face anymore, right? Maybe you said that the first year they started, right? You had your doubts about whether they were still competitive golfers. That has been completely shed at this stage. So DJ going out there finishing top 5, top 10 almost every single week out there on the Live Tour has to mean something. And, if you take a look at the long-term pedigree of DJ, right? Multiple time major champion, the sort of player that tears up a long major championship venue, right? You give him a course that's nearly 7,800 yards, and he's totally fine with it. He has more than enough power to take it on. He's still a pretty good short game player, really good putter when he has his best stuff, and the long irons are kind of what he's known for. So if you're looking just from the long-term course fit, you're talking about a top 5 player when it comes to the course fit. Now, the stats have regressed a little bit, right? That's why he's now number 20 when it comes to my Valhalla course fit But if you look at truly, let's say even the last 2-3 years stats, I mean, there was a time, I think it was 2019, maybe even 2020, where DJ was the number one player in the world, right? A lot of people don't remember that time. Maybe you got into golf a little bit after DJ really hit his peak, but there was a time where he was winning like every other event, like every 3 events DJ would win, right? It was peaked off with the Liberty National, him nearly shooting 59. I think the guy was something else, and that really wasn't that long ago, right? It was like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. Obviously, time moves on. You regress a little bit as you get older, but DJ at $8,000 still has winning upside at this kind of event, right? Let alone top 5 upside there at plus 1,500. So I loved that bet. I think he has plenty of top 5 equity, but for GPPs, where I don't think he's going to be mega chalky, I think he'll get some attention because of the cheap price tag. But if you're giving me a sub 15% owned DJ, like I'll get leverage on that all day, right? Especially if we somehow get a sub 10% owned Dustin Johnson. So I don't know if I trust him enough to win. That's why I've stayed away from the outright, but to go out there, spike a top 5 finish is well within his range of outcomes. So it's more of a course fit thing. Again, a guy who has the power to go on and take this golf course, and long term fits this type of track. I mean, one at Oakmont, another one of these classic kind of Midwest kind of designs over there in Pittsburgh, which I'll be at next year. Of course, that's where the US Open is out there in 2025. So your boy, Pittsburgh proud, right? Born there and whatnot. Huge Steeler fan. Will be at that US Open. He won there at a similar kind of golf course to what we're going to get this week. Before we talk about our value plays, get into some top 10 bets that I'm mixing in further down the board, make sure to check out my Patreon page for everything you see in this video. So if you're wondering where you can get access to these spreadsheets yourself, right, to go out there, do your research, check out where my exposure is, projections, my modeling is for every single player that's in this major championship, well, check out the link in the description of the video. On there, you guys can find the Golf DFS tier, and for just $15 a month, get access to these for every single main slate, right, not just the majors, every single week out there on the PGA Tour, and for rounds 2 through 4 showdown. So I do these for the main slate, get you researched out there for your, outright bets, also out there for all of your DFS exposure for main slate. But for rounds 2 through 4 showdown, where we have single round contests, also props that I'm entering for rounds 2 through 4, make sure to check those out over there on the Patreon. So that's down below. Like I said, link in the description, and you can download these sheets, which have all my projections and modeling on them. They change as I change my exposure throughout the week, all over there on the Patreon page. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk through some of our value plays. So we talked through our core plays, right? Guys towards the top end of the board I'm taking stands on. Well, now down low, we're trying to squeeze out some value, right? Save some salary, open up a little bit of flexibility up top, give us a little bit more salary to use to maybe take an extra spend up and try and get some leverage. So we're going to start with the live golfer. So our third live golfer of this video, last one, I promise, that we're talking about. But Dean Burmester has been arguably the best player on live golf this year. Joaquin Niemann's probably number 1, but Burmester is definitely at least 2 or 3, right? John Rahm's up there. He's almost top 5 every single week. But Burmester has a win this year, has 2 DP World Tour wins over here in 2024. I think they were last fall, so technically 2023, but in recent memory, right? 2 wins worldwide, and also is a player that's top 10ing almost every week over there on the Live Tour. So again, I give them a lot of credit because I know the talent level they have on that tour, and in general, first off, bomber off the tee. The guy hits the ball as far as DJ, as far as John Rahm does off the tee. So that's telling you something when it comes to his power. Very accurate off the tee and has been flushing it with the irons. And when you get a hot putter going, that's when he won over there at Live Miami. Even without his putter, is going out there and finishing top 10 on Live. So has been very consistent, right? We're taking him for a top 10 over here at the major now. And while he hasn't had a ton of success in majors, hasn't made very many majors, when it comes to just even getting to play in them, I'll take him at plus 900, right? He's plus 800 on a few other books. You're getting, it's not like an outright number like you get at 20, 30 to 1 on somebody, but plus 900 is a pretty good amount of juice there for something that I think is very realistic from Dean Burmester. He fits this kind of golf course. We're looking for those long iron players, those bombers off the tee. And if you're looking for form, right, like Burmester, if he was playing on the PGA Tour, he'd probably be an $8,500 golfer, right? Like if he was top 10ing every single week on the PGA Tour, he might even be like a $9,000 golfer in this kind of field. So I think way too cheap based on how he's been playing. And, you're comparing him to a Norn, right, a Jaeger, Akshay, who have pretty decent form over there at the PGA Tour. Dean Burmester has elite level form, like way, way, way better form than all those sort of players, albeit on the Live Tour, right? So obviously you knock it down a little bit because the PGA Tour is a slightly higher, competition level. But at the same time, it's still very respectable to go out there and do that. So $7,000, cheap enough to open up some salary. I don't think it's going to be super chalky this week because he's a Live Tour player. And on top of that, I think he's worth a shot out there for the top 10 at plus 900. Next play is going to be Keith Mitchell for a top 10 at plus 1100. So 11-1 to finish top 10. And you can see over here is my number 5 course fit when it comes to the stats long term. A lot of that is the ball striking, one of the best drivers in the field, right? Is both long and accurate off the tee. So kind of like a John Rahm, Scotty is going to get a huge benefit at this kind of golf course. And if you take a look at the approach stats, the green and regulation stats, they are next level, right? So Burmester, we're not going to get to learn much here, right? These stats are not from the PGA Tour. But you can see gaining a bunch off the tee, even from what we have there, right? Pretty solid around the green. Now a better iron player, so that's why he's been playing so well. But with Keith Mitchell, the stats are next level. I mean, gaining over 0.8 strokes off the tee, 0.9 strokes on approach. And though he doesn't have the best major championship record, you have to think it's going to come at some point, right? He's an absolute flusher. He fits these sort of golf courses. And I do think he'll get some attention, right? The shots gained metrics are just too good for people to pass up, but I don't think he's going to be mega chalky. I don't think he'll be over 10% owned. And in this sort of contest where, a top 20 is going to get close to optimal, a top 10, like what we're getting for our, bet here, right? With the top 10 bet at plus 1100, if you get top 10 at $6,600, that is for sure going to make the optimal lineup. So I think way, way too cheap, right? Probably $1,000 too cheap for this type of event. And I don't think is going to get enough attention, enough ownership out there for GPPs and make him somebody that I'm looking to fade out there. So I think has some upside, right? Really fits this golf course. Long irons that off the tee are both checked off. And then his putting on bent grass is a lot better than what you've seen on other surfaces lately. So maybe we get a little bit of putting regression there as well. And now for our last play, we got to go the whole way down to $5,500. And I got a top 10 at plus 2,000, so 20-1 on that, which I think is a little bit out there, but I'll take a shot on Jordell Smith. But yeah, it's a DP World Tour standout, a flusher, very long player off the tee, really good long iron player over there on the DP World Tour that has been playing really good golf. And anytime we see him over here on the PGA Tour, he plays really well. So if you take a look at the shots gained metrics out there for Jordell Smith, you can see anytime we happen to get him at a major, we happen to get him at WGC, wherever the case is that we're getting shots gained metrics, he gains a bunch of ball striking. 0.6 strokes off the tee, 0.5 strokes on approach. If you take a look at the DP World Tour stuff that they're starting to post, he gains a bunch in both of those categories compared to those fields. Maybe not the best, most consistent putter, but we don't really care about that much about the around the green and putting this week, right? This is much more about the ball striking. And for Jordell Smith to be optimal, right? A top 15 probably is, a top 20 might even be close to optimal out there in large field GPPs. We're not asking for all that much from him, right? Go out there, you ball strike the living heck out of it. Maybe you're just a neutral, you gain one stroke with the flat stick. That might be enough to go out there and get to that top 20 finish. So I got the top 10. The top 20 number just wasn't good enough for me over there on Hard Rock Bet, but top 10 at plus 2,000, I'll take that all day. And as a player then at $5,500, that if you played him, right, you could go Scotty, then maybe Brooks as your second man in that kind of build. So it opens up a lot of flexibility. It's not necessarily who you're getting right down here at $5,500. A lot of times it's what you're getting up top. But I do like Jordell Smith. I think that he's just the kind of ball striker that we're looking for, right? Pretty long player off the tee that actually has that top 10 upside. So obviously if I'm betting him top 10, I think he has the upside to potentially get that done. And it's $5,500 would give you some leverage, right? I don't think it'll be super chalky this week out there in GPPs, and also plenty of flexibility when it comes to your salary, right? And allocation with the rest of your lineup. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for this week's DFS and betting preview. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared to go out there, enter some lineups, take an outright bet or two, and ready to get after it for this major championship event. Before you hopping out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also go ahead and comment down below who you have as your winner for this week for a free chance to earn a month of my Patreon. And we're going to go ahead and open that up to anybody that is 10-1 or more. So the only players you can't take would be Scotty and Rory. And once a player's taken once, you cannot take them again. So the player I'm going to take is Brooks Koepka, right? He's the one that I have by far the most units on when it comes to an outright this week. So anyone but Rory, Scotty, and then Brooks Koepka is up to be taken for that contest. So if you get that, you will win a free month of my Patreon page. We're going out there and getting the winner this week. So let me know your thoughts down there in the comments, and let's have ourselves a week out there for this major. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have plenty of content dropping, including some prop breakdown a little bit tomorrow afternoon for Underdog and Prize Picks. We'll have our weekly live stream Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time, where you can drop any questions you have down in chat to go ahead and get those answered. Just some showdown content for Thursday through Saturday. You guys know the deal at this stage. So plenty to come. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of that when it drops. And best of luck out there with whatever exposure you guys are getting to.